All rise for the jury.
The jury in the murder trial of Derek Chauvin began its deliberations on Monday after closing arguments from the prosecution and defense and 3 weeks of testimony in a case that has gripped the nation.
Ultimately, it really isn't that complicated.
Prosecutor Jerry Blackwell wrapped up closing arguments with an appeal to the jury's common sense, telling them to trust what they saw in the video of George Floyd's death under the knee of the former Minneapolis police officer.
You can believe your eyes, ladies and gentlemen. It was what you thought it was. It was what you saw. It was homicide.
Lead defense attorney Eric Nelson argued it wasn't that simple, saying more analysis was needed and that Chauvin behaved as any reasonable police officer would.
We have to analyze this case from the perspective of a reasonable police officer at the precise moment with the totality of the circumstances when it comes to the use of force. We have to look at the cause of death to determine, did Mr. Floyd die exclusively of asphyxia, or were there other contributing factors?
Prosecutor Blackwell's rebuttal.
The fact that other causes contribute to the death does not relieve the defendant of criminal liability. Reasonable officer. Reasonable officer is not magic words that you simply apply to Mr. Chauvin, and then he becomes a reasonable officer because you applied those words. Reasonable is as reasonable does.
Earlier, prosecutor Steve Schleicher said it was, quote, nonsense to believe that anything other than a knee on the neck for more than 9 minutes killed Floyd.
It's nonsense.
Nelson disagreed.
I would submit to you that it is nonsense to suggest that none of these other factors had any role. That is not reasonable.
The jury's verdict will be seen as a reckoning in the way the U.S. polices black people, but the prosecution urged the jury to weigh the guilt of the man, not the system.
He betrayed the badge. He chose pride over policing.
The magnitude of the case and possibility that a not guilty verdict could trigger renewed civil unrest was evident in downtown Minneapolis, where 3,000 National Guard troops have been deployed.